You weren't supposed to find this video, but maybe something in you needed to. Maybe it's been a long day. Maybe someone's been on your mind, not for what they did, but for how they made you feel. Or maybe you're just tired of surface-level advice and ready for something deeper. This isn't a list of cheesy nicknames. It's a guide to emotional language. 5 powerful phrases that don't just flatter her, they reveal her. Because when you speak to a woman's soul, not just her ears, you leave an imprint. And long after you leave the room, she'll still feel you there. So stay with me. This might be the conversation you didn't know you needed. Part 1. Trouble. Some women walk into your life like a breeze. Others arrive like a storm you never saw coming. She was the latter. It was a late October evening in Asheville, North Carolina. The kind where the air is laced with wood smoke and the leaves crunch beneath your boots like quiet confessions. Jack hadn't planned on meeting anyone that night. He was just grabbing coffee after work. Flannel shirt, tired eyes, the usual. And then she walked in. Red scarf. No smile, but a spark in her eyes that said, "I dare you." She ordered something complicated, oat milk, cinnamon, a twist of honey, and took the table next to his. When she caught him watching, she didn't look away. She smirked. Just a little. "Trouble," Jack muttered under his breath. Not loud enough for her to hear, but loud enough for something to stir inside him. See, that word, trouble, isn't about chaos or warning. Not the way most people use it. When a man says it with calm eyes and a half smile, he's not running away. He's leaning in. It's not just a flirt. It's an acknowledgement. You rattle me and I kind of like it. Trouble reframes who she is. She's no longer just attractive. She's a disruption, a curveball in a life that's grown too straight, and that's intoxicating. Because let's be honest, most people don't fall in love with what's easy. They fall for what moves them, what unbalances them, what makes them forget what they were so sure of. The beauty of calling her trouble isn't in the word, it's in the timing. In the moment she makes a sharp comment you weren't ready for, in the way she raises an eyebrow and doesn't say a thing, but still says everything. That's when you lean closer and say it with that calm, almost reverent amusement. Your trouble. It's an emotional mirror, reflecting back the side of her she doesn't always let the world see. Bold, unpredictable, deliciously disarming. It's not a compliment to her looks, it's a nod to her impact. And here's the secret. When a woman feels that she affects you, not that you've lost control, but that she shifts the ground beneath your feet just a little, it sticks with her, because it means she matters, not as an object, but as a presence. Used well, trouble becomes more than a nickname. It's a signature, a silent invitation that says, "You woke something up in me, and I'm not mad about it." Jack didn't ask her name that night. He didn't need to. As she left, she looked back once, scarf dancing in the wind, and winked. And for the rest of the week, when the world felt too quiet, Jack whispered that one word to himself. Trouble. And smiled. Part 2. Heartbreaker. Some women leave footprints, others leave echoes. She left a silence that sang long after she walked away. It was late spring in Charleston, South Carolina. The kind of evening where the humidity clings to your shirt and the cicadas hum like background music to forgotten memories. Thomas sat alone at a rooftop wedding reception, sipping bourbon and watching the lanterns flicker overhead. He hadn't expected to see her again, not after all these years. But there she was, laughing with someone in a navy suit, her hair longer now, her dress the color of regret. It wasn't that she was the most beautiful woman in the room. She was the most remembered. When she glanced his way, their eyes met for the first time in 6 years, and without thinking, without flinching, he smiled and murmured to no one in particular, "Heartbreaker," but not with bitterness, not with self-pity, with a kind of quiet awe, because that's what heartbreaker means when it's spoken with grace. It's not an accusation. It's not even a warning. It's an acknowledgement, a salute. A woman who's called Heartbreaker by a man who isn't chasing her, who isn't broken by her, but sees her, truly sees her, not just for her beauty, but for her pattern. That woman pauses, because it's rare. Most men either idolize or resent. But when you say Heartbreaker with a smile that knows how to let go, you offer her something no pedestal or poem ever could. Recognition without need, admiration without surrender. She doesn't just feel praised, she feels understood. And that understanding holds power. Because most women, especially the ones who've been admired for years, are used to the echo chamber of shallow compliments. You're gorgeous. You're stunning. You're unreal. But when a man simply looks at her and says without heat or hunger, Heartbreaker, and then takes a sip of his drink like he's said something true, not seductive, he becomes someone different. Not another voice in the crowd trying to win her, but the one voice that sees her and walks away whole. Thomas didn't approach her that night. He didn't need to. As the music swelled and she danced with someone else, she looked back at him for just a breath, and in that moment, he could feel it. She remembered, not the man who chased her, but the one who saw her, the one who knew her pattern and didn't try to change it. Heartbreaker isn't a word of loss. It's a word of knowing, a whisper from the man who could have fallen, but didn't. And somehow that's the one she never forgets. Part 3. My favorite headache. She wasn't easy, but God, she was unforgettable. In Flagstaff, Arizona, where the pine trees rise like cathedrals and the sky at dusk burns in orange and purple, David sat behind the counter of his small bike shop, listening to a voicemail for the third time. Seriously, David, you moved my tools again. I swear if I trip over that wrench one more time. It was Ellie, his ex-girlfriend, or maybe not quite ex, or maybe something more complicated than that. They'd known each other 5 years, loved each other for maybe 2, argued for all 5. She was fierce, sharp-witted, stubborn as desert rock. She never laughed at his jokes, unless they were accidental. She couldn't stand his habit of leaving dishes in the sink. He couldn't stand her always being right, and yet, every time she called, even to yell, he smiled. She was, without question, his favorite headache. You see, that phrase isn't just clever wordplay. It's a quiet confession. My favorite headache means you challenge me in ways I didn't expect, and I wouldn't trade it for peace and quiet. It's not about tolerating her flaws. It's about craving her fire. There's something magnetic in the contradiction. How someone can frustrate you and still be the one you'd rather argue with than be at peace with anyone else. That emotional friction, when held with warmth and humor, becomes intimacy. Because love isn't always soft. Sometimes it's sharp edges learning how to dance. When you say, in the middle of her teasing you, her crossing her arms, her making that face she always makes when you're being impossible, "You're my favorite headache." You're not insulting her. You're telling her that her chaos has a reserved seat in your life. It's that exact blend of "you drive me crazy" and "I wouldn't change a thing." Women don't want perfection. They want impact. To know they move you, disrupt you, matter to you, not because they're agreeable, but because they're real. That's what this phrase does. It tells her she stirs something inside you that no one else does, that her presence isn't smooth, but it's essential. She's not easy, but she's yours, not because you have her, but because you've accepted that love. Real love is supposed to be a little messy. David never deleted that voicemail. In fact, he played it again that night. And when Ellie finally showed up 3 days later, tools in hand, hair tied back in that defiant little knot, he looked up, smiled and said, "You know, you're still my favorite headache." She rolled her eyes. But she didn't stop smiling either. Part 4. Wild card. Some people follow the rules. She rewrote them just by walking in. It was a Friday night in Austin, Texas. The kind of night where the bars are alive with guitar strings and neon, and everyone's either chasing something or trying to forget something. Ethan wasn't chasing or forgetting, he was just waiting. He sat at the corner table of a dive bar called the Hollow Fox. Nothing fancy. Pool table in the back. Bartender who remembered names and heartbreaks. He came here most weeks, always ordered the same drink, old-fashioned, hold the cherry. But that night she walked in. Not late, not loud, just unscripted. She wore boots too worn to be trendy and laughed like she didn't care if anyone thought it was too loud. She challenged the bartender on his bourbon pour. She made a joke about the jukebox. She looked Ethan in the eye like he wasn't invisible, like he might be worth arguing with. After 5 minutes of back and forth, no small talk, just sparks and sharp remarks, Ethan leaned back, shook his head with a smile, and said it. "You're such a wild card." And she grinned, like he'd just told her a secret about herself she hadn't heard before, but somehow always knew. That's the magic of calling a woman a wild card. You're not flattering her. You're recognizing her. It's not about how she looks. It's about how she moves through the world, with spontaneity, with energy, with something untamed. Most compliments put women in a box. You're beautiful, you're sweet, you're smart. Safe labels, predictable praise. But when you call her a wild card, you do something rare. You tell her she can't be predicted. And you like it that way. You're not trying to control her or decode her. You're enjoying the mystery. You're letting her know that the unpredictability she sometimes second guesses is exactly what makes her unforgettable. And here's where the psychology runs deep. When you give someone a name, especially one that honors their chaos rather than trying to tame it, they often grow into it. The wild card becomes more bold, more unapologetic, not for attention, but because someone finally made her feel safe being unpredictable. The key, you say it with calm confidence, not as a line, not as a tactic, but as a quiet truth. Wild card, Ethan had said, and meant it. She stayed for 2 more drinks, beat him at darts, challenged his taste in blues music, and when she left, she didn't leave her number, just a smile and a promise. "Maybe I'll surprise you again sometime." And Ethan, who'd spent most of his life organizing every detail, suddenly hoped she would. Part 5. Muse. She didn't change his world with a kiss. She changed it by simply being in it. In a quiet corner of Vermont, nestled between 2 mountain ridges that caught the last of the October sun, there lived a man named Caleb. He was a writer, or at least that's what his neighbors called him. He called himself retired. He hadn't published in almost 7 years. His once celebrated short stories had grown dusty in the drawers of a pine desk. His life had become quiet, patterned, predictable, and a little too numb. Then one morning, as the first snow dusted the porch railings, she moved in next door. Her name was Lily. She wore paint-stained jeans, read poetry to her dog, and had a habit of humming when she watered the garden. She didn't ask about his past, and she didn't try to impress him. But one afternoon, as they drank tea under the fading maple trees, she looked at him, really looked, and said, "Do you ever miss your words?" It hit him like thunder in clear sky, because no one had asked him that. Not even he had asked himself. That night he wrote again. Just one paragraph, just one breath of something real, and it was because of her. You see, when a man calls a woman his muse, he's not saying she's a fantasy. He's saying she awakens something. She stirs the waters of his mind. She doesn't just attract him, she reanimates him. Muse isn't about obsession, it's about transformation. It's about the way she shifts the air when she walks in, how her thoughts pull him out of his own, how her presence reminds him he's not just a man, he's a soul still capable of being moved. When Caleb finally told her, quietly, simply, "You're kind of my muse," Lily didn't laugh. She didn't blush. She just tilted her head and whispered, "Then write something worth that." And so he did. Not for her approval, not for fame, but because something in her reminded him of who he was before the world dulled him. That's what muses do. They don't complete you. They ignite what's already there. Women don't just want to be desired. They want to matter. They want to know that their presence leaves an emotional fingerprint on a man's life. That she wasn't just another passing attraction. She was a turning point. When you call her your muse, what you're really saying is, my world is more beautiful because you're in it. And if you say that with honesty, not as a line, not as a performance, but as a revelation, it becomes something unforgettable. Because beauty fades, but being someone's inspiration, that lingers. Lily never read the story Caleb wrote about her. She didn't need to. She was the story. Conclusion: more than words. In the end, the right words aren't tricks. They're reflections, not of who she is, but of how deeply you've noticed. We live in a world of noise, of notifications, shallow compliments, and gestures made to impress more than to connect. Most conversations barely graze the surface. Most names are thrown out carelessly. Baby, babe, beautiful, used so often they lose meaning. But not these. Trouble, Heartbreaker, my favorite headache, wild card, Muse. They aren't just nicknames. They're invitations, quiet emotional doors that open when a man has the presence to truly see a woman, not just look at her, not to own her, not to win her, but to witness her, her light, her chaos, her impact, her rhythm, her mystery. And when spoken with calm confidence, not performance, each name becomes a moment she remembers. Not because you said something clever, but because in that moment she felt something real. She felt playful in a world that often demands her to be composed. She felt dangerous in a way that felt safe. She felt significant in a way that had nothing to do with appearance. She felt like someone who could change a man's life, not by trying, but by being. That's the power of emotional language. Not to manipulate, but to connect. Because at her core, a woman doesn't want to be pursued like a prize. She wants to be remembered like a story. The kind you don't just retell, but relive in silence, years after the final page is turned. And the man who learns how to speak with that kind of emotional presence, who listens with his heart, who teases with warmth, who names her essence instead of her face, he becomes something rare, not louder, not flashier, but unforgettable. So the next time you find yourself with a woman who stirs something honest in you, don't default to what's easy or expected. Pause, look deeper, and when the moment's right, let the words fall from that quiet place between humor and truth. Because maybe the thing she'll remember most is the moment she realized you didn't just notice her smile, you noticed her. If this story touched something quiet in you, if it reminded you of someone you once knew, or someone you hope to meet, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Which of these nicknames speaks most to the kind of connection you crave? Have you ever been someone's trouble, someone's muse? Or maybe you still are? Share your story in the comments below. Because sometimes one honest moment from you can unlock something in someone else. And if you want more stories that don't just talk at you, but with you, more reflections on love, depth, presence, and the beautiful mess that is human connection, you're in the right place. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on the little bell. Not for content, for companionship. The kind that meets you where you are and walks with you just a little while. Thank you for being here. We'll meet again in the next story.